Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Gwede Mantashe, is hosting a signing ceremony with the first 3 preferred bidders to offer onshore wind energy. Let's take you there live.
Because we must develop that part of the world. We can't be open to a situation where there is disruption in Gauteng and KZN, 50% of the GDP disappears. It can't be. We must spread development to provinces that we need to ignore. We need that development to be spread all over. So we must develop the Northern Cape, we must develop the Eastern Cape, which is poorly developed. And I think we must have a convention with environmentalists to appreciate that we must coexist, we must stay together, we must work together, we must develop the country. We can't push a situation that is anti-development. Thank you very much. I'm here. I'm happy to be here. Let's sign the agreement and then begin to generate energy. Give us more energy. Give us more energy. Give us more energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now go straight into Q&A. I know there are many questions, but I'm going to ask that we try and focus the questions on what we hear for today. I'm sure, Minister, you touched on load shedding, and I'm sure there's 1 or 2 questions. No, we'll entertain them, but yeah, I'm not limiting them. I'm just helping refocus. So I think I will take them maybe 3 hands at a time, and then we allow the panel to respond. I see there's a hand. Yeah. Okay. There's 3 hands already here in front. We'll take them in that order.
Hi there. This is.
Please introduce yourself. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm Julia Evans from Daily Maverick. So this is regarding the delays. So considering this process takes so long, and the 2019 RIP says that we're meant to have already 1,600 megawatts of wind active this year, why was the request for proposals only announced in 2021? Why was it not immediately announced when the 2019 RIP came out? Can I ask more than one question?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, and then regarding the base load, Minister Mantashe, what do you say to energy experts who say that our base load generators are actually able to meet our current base load requirements almost exactly, and that it's actually the stuff of the base load that poses the immediate problem? And then a question to the energy companies, what's the estimated P50 and P90 annual energy yields? Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Terence?
Thanks. Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Just in terms of, Bernard mentioned October being the final date for signing the other 22 projects. What happens beyond October if those projects are not signed? And can you give us a similar deadline for the risk mitigation outstanding projects? Secondly, to EDF, the exchange rate has moved quite considerably since you signed. Can you give us some indication? I know you haven't reached financial close, but the sort of ballpark, what sort of cents per kilowatt hours you're going to be coming in at with these 3 projects? And could you also give us some technical details around these projects, where the turbines are from, how much local content is in that, and who are the main contractors? And then to Eskom, bid window 6, to avoid the budget quote delays that we saw for bid window 5, what is being done to prepare for bid window 6? I know you mentioned the grid capacity assessment is available. Will there be limitations, for instance, on where projects can be located under bid window 6 to stop, to prevent the bid budget quote delays that we saw this time round. And then to the Minister, in terms of streamlining procurement, we can see how long it's taken to get to this point. We've only got 3 projects. I know we're now talking about a battery program, etc. How are we going to get these projects, procurement processes streamlined so that we can move with quite greater speed in getting to financial close? Thank you.
Right, thanks. You can proceed.
Hi, it's Deneen Erasmus from Business Day. I think Terence has asked all the questions on everybody's list, but maybe then to just add to those and to EDP, there was a quote on the job hours that's being created, but can you maybe just explain in terms of job numbers? So how many jobs for how many years, just so that it's easier to understand?
All right. No, thanks for the questions. We will try and respond to all the questions that have been asked. Minister, let me start with you. Okay. Or you want to come last?
Not the technical people.
Okay. All right. Let me respond to the first one. It's fine. I'll respond to the first one on the RFPs and why does it take so long. I think it's a good question for me because a lot of people have limited understanding of the process. If you look at the process that we have in place, once the IRP is promulgated or a determination, first there are a number of steps that has to happen. Once the IRP is promulgated, the first step that you have to take is that you have to issue a determination. The determination goes to NESA for concurrence. Right? And part of the NESA process is that they are required to put it out for public consultation. So that period takes quite some time. And this particular Section 34 determination was the first one that we had issued under the IRP 2019. I think it took NESA about 6 months, if not 8 months, to actually finally concur to that after the promulgation of the IRP. They've since shortened the timelines. I mean, we've seen recently with the determination significantly shortened the timelines. The second part of the process is that when we develop the IPP office develops the request for proposals, because Eskom is the buyer, there is then interaction with Eskom in terms of what we're putting out there to make sure that they are comfortable. But Eskom also runs its own process to make sure that they do their own due diligence as the buyer in terms of the process. And yes, we have identified that that is one part of the process that we seriously need to look at in terms of improving, right? In terms of how do we streamline that part of the process, because it does take quite some time. But why specifically the bid window 5 took time was because after bid window 4, the risk profile has completely changed. I mean, there was a long discussion around how the risk allocation in bid window 5 compared to bid window 4 should be managed. So that process took quite a bit of time, and hence there was almost like it looked like there was a lull between the IRP promulgation and when the RFP was issued. I'm going to ask the team from EDF to respond to the P50 question, the number of questions, to respond to the question around the job numbers, job years, to respond to the question around the exchange rate and the cents per kilowatt hour. I think those are the 3 questions that were specific to yourselves. Maybe you want to use the...
Thanks for your questions. First of all, we are EDF, not EDP. EDP is Eletricidade do Portugal, so it's another country. We're from France. That was the first point. The P50 of the 3 wind farms is between 1.7 and 1.8 terawatt hours per year, which is enormous. It is a little bit less than a 50% load factor, which is, I mean, it shows the fantastic resource of the site we have developed. In terms of local content, so we're above the 40% value of the project that will be spent locally, which is quite a challenge. It's something that we meet in the countries where we operate, and it's always something that we try hard to achieve, because we understand that we can only be sustainable in a country when we grow the local industry. So that's something that we've been working very hard at. Of course, in terms of the turbines, there are no turbine manufacturers in South Africa. That's well known. But with our partner Goldwind, who will be the suppliers for these turbines, we've worked on a concrete tower solution. And the concrete tower manufacture will be built and developed in the immediate vicinity of the project in the Middelburg town. So that's for the local content. So in terms of job creations, you're also familiar with the fact that the program asks us very detailed commitments on job creations. So all these figures are detailed, and I won't comment on each of them. I think they can be made available. But in terms of global number, we are talking about 2,230 job creation opportunities on the whole life cycle of the project. Obviously, the bulk of this happens during the 2 years of construction. But long-term jobs will also be created locally for the operation phase to maintain the 78 turbines and the main transmission and the various substations that will enable the evacuation of the power. Mr. Creamer, you asked a question about the final cost of construction. So Bernd Magaro cited the fact that it's a project in the range of 11 billion of investment. So with 420 megawatts, we are around 26 million rands per megawatt, which is a significant investment. And I think it's in the range of the projects we can see these days. The construction of the substation was heavy on the project. It's a significant chunk of the costs, but due to the good wind, we could, as I said earlier, allow for this construction. So that's it for the questions that were asked.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there were a couple of questions around what we are doing to streamline and ensure that we don't cause delays on bid window 6. Two things. One is that a lot of work has been done between Eskom through the grid access unit and the IPP office to in fact streamline the processes and to shorten the turnaround time for cost estimate letters and budget codes. Secondly, just as part of the illustration of the change on bid window 6, there are, as people may know, there's a requirement for a cost estimate letter, and for bid window 6, all those that have been received by Eskom have been issued. And if you look at the equivalent capacity of those applications, they total 32,000 megawatts. So Eskom is trying to do its best to fast track the dealing and addressing the quotations. And last, with regard to just being pragmatic, I think this point of transparency and working together, we have indicated where we have available grid capacity, and there's a lot of interest that is being expressed around those facilities. You will also have heard the announcement that Eskom had also offered to lease some of its land vacant around some of the power stations and other facilities. And the subscription for those total something like 1,800 megawatts, which is just the first tranche of people who will build without a PPA with Eskom. They are building through the 100 megawatt or the new dispensation. So I think the industry is responding to where the opportunities lie and to take advantage of that. Clearly, what the minister said is very important, that we are working hard to develop the networks to the southern parts of the country, Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and so on. but we have to go through the EIAs, we have to acquire the servitudes and so on, and before we even get to building. So a lot of work is happening to also unlock those parts of the country. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I think it came from Terence. We've always maintained that the reason for the delay was the BQ issuing. As I mentioned earlier, all the projects have now received their BQs, and the next step is obviously to sign the agreements. It did take long to get these 3 projects agreements concluded, and what I'm happy about is the base agreements that we developed through this process should make the process much easier for the remaining 22 projects. So from where we are ready for the remaining projects to come, and then we sign by end of October. I must mention that given the load shedding that we're experiencing, we need this capacity like yesterday. So there's really no need for us to delay any further. And there will be other bid windows. So if you miss this bus, there's another bid window that's coming. So that's the approach that we're taking going forward. Similarly, with risk mitigation, we have until end of October to conclude that process. We were looking at a few optimization requests that we received from the preferred bidders in those programs. We had to make sure that we do things right legally. So there's been legal opinions and things that we needed to make sure that we don't compromise the process. And that has been finalized. And again, where we are is we want to conclude both programs by end of October. Just to confirm what Mr. Skipper said, we have refined the BQ process. And it's important to mention here that those who will be preferred bidders for bid window 6, they will be given limited time to finalize their designs and hand them over to Eskom for approvals. The one, I wouldn't say mistake, but the one lesson from bid window 5 is that this process took longer, which is why we had to postpone the April deadline for signing, where some projects did not submit their designs on time for Eskom to approve. So we found a way to manage that going forward. DG, I'm not sure if there's another process. I think on streamlining the process going forward, the biggest risk, we have tried to look at what we can do on our side in project documents, the RFP, the agreements. So those seems to be under control going forward. It shouldn't be a problem. The biggest risk that we see, and we have engaged the markets, the lenders, to see what is the optimal time, the most quickest way to get the lenders to approve, for example, their due diligence. Everything seems to be under control, but the weakest link seems to be the grid, which is why there is this focus between ourselves and the grid access unit to deal with that issue. So we don't foresee the delays that we have seen in bid window 5 going forward. And I think we'll make the announcement in this regard for bid window 6, how soon we expect financial close going forward. So thank you very much.
They've answered all the questions, except that on streamlining procurement, there is a great effort put into that. For example, as a result of the electricity crisis, there is NECOM that has been put together from the presidency. And the beauty of that structure is that all the relevant ministers meet under one roof. Unlike the system that we've been using, where if you want any approval, you need support of DPE, you need support of DTIC, Treasurer, and all of us will meet under one roof. That will accelerate procurement. As an example, the bid window 6, the increase of what should come out of bid window 6 from 2,600 to 4,200 is an agreement of the ministers together that we need to increase that because we need to accelerate the supply of energy from renewables. 3 is that 100 megawatts ceiling. Terence, let me report this to you. We have gazetted removal of the cap altogether, which is total deregulation of embedded generation. And to me, once you remove, you deregulate. The 2 advantages is that any company can build as much capacity as it can, but at the same time, it is not restricted by the state being required to guarantee uptake. So it's a balanced approach. So we're expecting people to take advantage of that. Lastly is the exchange rate. The issue of the exchange rate is strengthening our debate on localization, because the exchange rate is a problem when you import, but it is not a problem when you export. It's an advantage. I know that from mining, that when the exchange rate becomes weaker, we know that's an advantage because you get more rands from a dollar. And so localization becomes quite important instead of being required to import almost every component of the project. Thank you very much.
We'll take another round if there is. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. Let me start with the gentleman in the back. Yeah. Okay. There's 2 questions at the back. We'll take those. Yeah.
Good day. My name is Buleli Treaty Jones from ENCA. Firstly, I'd like to start by congratulating this program. I think it's the right step in the right direction. But secondly, the mood on the ground is very upsetting. People are angry, and some also threatening to actually embark on massive protests and shutdowns due to this load shedding. Minister, I'd like to ask first, maybe with the first question, why are we still operating in crisis mode? Maybe that's just to break it down a bit for a normal viewer who's also watching and doesn't understand about the program we're having today. And secondly, are we generating power from other IPPs already? If not, how soon are we anticipating that to start? And then maybe lastly, before I go, you know, the entire world is in the grips of an energy crisis. You mentioned Texas, EU, the UK, even Australia. And strangely enough, the EU and the UK particularly have decided to revert back to coal and gas, and not solar nor wind. Are we taking a different approach in terms of the coal method, or are we looking at a better alternative in terms of implementing more technological strategies to fighting this energy crisis in this country? Thank you.
I think the bid window stipulated about 47 cents per kilowatt hour, and it has been mentioned that that was one of the problems arising from this bid window, that bidders were now struggling in a changing environment to meet that price. Are you still confident that you'll be able to supply this energy at that stipulated price?
All right. I'm following orders.
Thank you for your question. So regarding the tariff of our project is public, has been made public on the date of the award. So our projects are delivering power around 600 rands per megawatt hour. Yes, we're confident, otherwise we would not be there today. It has been a very tough journey since the bid submission, because the world has gone through a strong supply chain crisis, and a very, very strong inflationary cycle has started since the bid submission. We managed to cope with that thanks to very hard work with our contractors and partners, and also thanks to optimizations on the project that could be made post-bid to cope with the price increase that was made. I think it's also a case of having made a prudent assumption on our costs at bid. We were not the cheapest by far, but then prudence pays off, I believe.
ENCA. The mood in society is one of a society that is upset. I agree with that. That is the mood. And the reason for that is simple. When you explain the crisis to society, South Africans see themselves as an island. When electricity energy crisis is a global phenomenon, South Africans don't accept that. They think it's a South African crisis. When you tell them that Europe, which was telling us to move out of coal quick, has ordered coal from us, which has grown 8-fold. Actually, the orders of coal from EU are at 720%. That is the increase we've seen. So this crisis is a global phenomenon, but we have a responsibility here to address the crisis. That's why we're still in a crisis mode. It's because it's a crisis, you don't need to explain it, you need to work hard to resolve it. And that takes me, are we regenerating from IPPs? There was that question. Yes, we do. Actually, between the 1, 2, 3, 4 are all connected to the grid. They generate energy and they put that energy in the grid. So we're dealing with bid window 5 now. Mr. Magoro, am I right? Yes, I think I am. Though those first bid windows were quite expensive, we must say that. That's why I'm one person who always argue that don't say when you give money to Eskom it's a bailout. Describe it as a premium we pay for attracting a technology into the economy. As we have that technology, it is scaling down the price. That is the benefit of investing in a technology. And people say these are Kala economics. It doesn't work that way. But I think it's a correct way because you got your bid window 1, very expensive, less bid window 2, less bid window 3, less bid window 4. Bid window 5 is the first bid window to come below the cost of generating energy and selling energy in Eskom. So, because we've invested in the technology. Now, the concept of the 20,000 megawatts when we have, I'm sure the group executive would explain that better. Eskom has 48,000 megawatts connected. Okay. They're not decommissioned, they're connected to the grid. But Eskom at now, at best, gives us 26,000 megawatts. That's where the 20,000 is. That's why we say part of the solution is to optimize the operation of Eskom. Please service and maintain the units that are not giving us energy. And we think that if we can invest in that, skills and resources, we will see a difference in terms of a shortfall on energy, and we may resolve the energy crisis. I hope I've explained it correctly as a social scientist. Social scientists are just good for being loud hailers for engineers.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister. I think your description is quite accurate. Perhaps instead of talking in general terms, let me just make an illustration. When we have load shedding or changes in stages of load shedding, we always send out a communique. The last one, not the last one, but the one I've got on my screen here is from Tuesday. So let me just read the last paragraph for you. This is Tuesday, the 20th of September. And the last paragraph says, we currently have 4,098 megawatts on planned maintenance, while another 18,932 megawatts of capacity is unavailable due to breakdowns. So that is where that kind of 20,000 number comes up. It's a painfully high number. If half of that was available, we would not be here. And I think that's why I said earlier that this is what is receiving attention, and it is not a quick or easy thing, but it's certainly receiving attention, because if we were not having these high levels of breakdowns, we would not be having the load shedding today. Thank you.
Okay. Last round. Going. Okay. I see 2 hands there. Okay, just those 2 hands, and then we move to the other side.
Good morning. My name is Mas Chaba Sifularo from Jacaranda FM. And I just wanted to ask, since we are on the topic of the energy crisis and Eskom specifically, there were remarks that were made by former President Thabo Mbeki yesterday, which spoke to the leadership or the leadership void within Eskom, the decisions that were made in 2007 leading to the construction of Kusile and Medupi. And he was quite critical and scathing in his comments around that. What are the remarks then by Minister Gwede Mantashe? Because he did mention earlier that the Eskom that he was a part of was functional and gave warnings that were not heeded. Thus, we find ourselves here today on Eskom and the current interventions that are being made with regards to load shedding right now. Are we confident and comfortable that the same mistakes will not be repeated, where 10 years past planned completion dates, we're still talking about a crisis that seems not to be, where there seems to not be an end in sight? Thank you.
Buleli Treaty Jones, once again from ENCA. Minister, just a follow-up question on that. The former president did speak about African intelligentsia, saying the downfall of Eskom is not because people don't know what they're doing, but because of politics that have infiltrated within the systems of running the state parastatal. Are you of the view that there's been just so much infiltration at Eskom that this is a reason why we find ourselves at this crisis? And just lastly, you spoke about maintenance as well at Eskom. Is it possible to fix the malfunctioning plants and liberate just about 17,000 megawatts, which will give us a much better baseload? Thank you.
Okay. Those were the last questions, Minister.
Okay. Let me start with the last one. Politics in parastatals, I don't know what politics is. It's like trying to describe economics. Everybody is impacted upon by economics. Everybody is impacted upon by politics. Politics, if it is a conflict of various ideologies in Eskom, I would be worried. But if the politics that we're referring to is the aftermath of the state capture, then we're coming close to the issue, because the state capture was about a framework which was directed at stealing. And therefore it created all sorts of problems. If that is what you call politics, maybe you're correct, but politics in general will not apply in Eskom. But politics of theft, thuggery, sabotage, there's something called coal mafia. I'm a coal miner. I never had experience of a coal mafia. Between Matla Coal and Matla Power, there was a conveyor belt. It worked perfectly. If there is a tracking of coal and then there's a coal mafia, then those are the politics. And to me, those are politics of theft and crookery. That's what it is. Experience. We had a meeting with the generation group of Eskom. We met every power station manager in that meeting. Almost all of them are in their position for between 1 and 2 years now, and they are relatively young. And therefore it talks to the experience and the extent of skills, because you can study knowledge that you acquire through education can only be converted into real skill in the application. I think that is where we are. That's why the latest report was that Eskom has taken 18 experienced engineers to help some of these leaders and help them in advising them. So if that is the issue, we need to address that issue. I agree. Because the Eskom I talk about, it was an Eskom that was actually have the skills, have a long pipeline of training. People were being taken in international institutions to study and then get into the system. Therefore, affirmative action was linked to a structured development program. When you appoint a person, he had gone through a particular program and had such an exposure. But if that falls off, it becomes just a racial issue. It won't work. Let me leave that. Let me go to the crisis of leadership. One of the things that I've said publicly all my life is that the worst thing you do when you're a leader is to criticize your predecessors and your successors. Can I tell you the risk of that? I've been a predecessor and a successor in many instances. The problem of comparing yourself with your predecessor or your successor is that you appear to be projecting your own space as clean, and everybody else is not clean. So I get worried when leadership begin to talk about leadership void and deficit. I get worried about that because leadership that is there, retired, has a responsibility to assist those who are still in leadership. If you criticize them, it's a nice thing to say on a stage, but it's a different issue if we're called upon to assist them fill the gaps that are there. Therefore, so the leadership that I'm expecting from my former presidents is that they will assist the current president grapple with issues. But if they take a podium and say he's useless, he's a disaster, then I switch off my radio because it's an easy way out. It doesn't talk to the problem that we're confronted with. We will not commit the same mistakes that we committed to be in this crisis. If life was full of guarantees, there will be no need to look for good managers because there will be guarantees. Then that we must look for good managers to run institutions is because you avoid mistakes, you avoid future mistakes. So if we are systematic in actual upskilling the capacity of management in Eskom, we'll be better off. We'll be much better off. If we are failing on that, we're cold feet in dealing with that reality, then we're going to be in trouble. My own view is that we need a lot of support for Eskom and the current leadership. And actually, but the first thing to help them is for them to accept their shortcomings. If when we see those shortcomings, they think that is an insult, then we are in trouble. But if they accept their shortcomings and they are prepared to engage people on closing those shortcomings, we are better off. That applies to Eskom, it applies to us in politics, applies to everybody. It applies to the DG and his team, the new DG.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this first part. We will now move to the next room where the actual signing of the contracts is going to take place. Thank you.
All right, that's a very important point there, that they're moving to the part where the actual agreements are going to be signed. So although we're moving on, we're going to be taking you back there momentarily.